This is Rick Walker. You're tuned in to Power Talk on 89.7 Power FM. And I have to say this. I have to apologize. Last week we were planning a live show with call-ins, and you know Texas, you know the weather. I got just hit with this terrible sinus infection and allergies. Well, okay, big deal. I get sinus infection, all that, whatever. You know, you might can still hear a trace of it in my voice tonight. But last Sunday, I had no voice. I mean, I was talking like this. And so I called Eddie and said, hey, we're just going to have to go with a repeat. So I apologize, but I'm back. I'm back. Here it is. It's Sunday evening and feeling a lot better. You know, a little bit of antibiotics and rest does the body wonders. Okay, so here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to introduce a couple of guests. We have a great evening lined up for you tonight, and I hope you're doing fantastic this Sunday night. We have Phil Shepard and Steve Knight on the phone line with us. Steve, Phil, how are you guys doing this evening?
Good. It sounds great. A lot better than you last week. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, you know, I just now that was Steve. Was that Steve making that comment?
No, that was Phil, the one that lives in Texas as well. I completely understand.
Yeah. So Phil, you know allergies. You know Texas because you're in Fort Worth, right?
Yes, sir, I am.
Yeah. Do you have the allergy stuff you mess with? I mean,
even my dogs have allergy problems.
I know. That's terrible. Texas is terrible with that. Yeah. Yeah, so anyway, all right, tonight we're talking about allergies, and no, I'm just kidding. Okay, so Phil Shepard, let me start with you. You're in Fort Worth. You're a co-pastor. You are working with Sogo Media TV. Tell me a little bit about who you are, what you do.
Yes, sir. My name is Phil Shepard. I am the co-founding pastor of the Eucatastrophe, which is an emergent missional community here in downtown Fort Worth, Texas. You can find us at theuc.com. And that's THEEUC.com. Also, I am the co-founding CEO of Sogo Media. And that's sogomedia.tv, which I'm fortunate enough to be on here with my business partner and one of my best friends in the whole world, Steve Knight, as well.
Ladies and gentlemen, Steve Knight. Steve, how are you?
I'm great. Glad to be here.
I asked you in the pre-show warm-up, like, how would you, I mean, what's your title? And you said community architect, and I went, So, Steve, who are you, Steve? Where are you calling us from? What do you do?
Yeah, I'm calling you from the Charlotte, North Carolina area. This is where I live, and, you know, when you ask me that title question, I wear a few different hats. But for the sake of this conversation, let's talk about my role as community architect with a thing called TransFORM Network. TransFORM is a few years old now. It's a missional community formation network. We started it, Phil and Stephanie Shepard, been on the leadership team and helped shape the vision for that over the last few years. And what we've done is we've gone around the country and done these regional gatherings and created space online for missional practitioners, people who are doing new forms of church, who are exploring what the church of now and in the future should look like. And we're excited to be doing our next gathering right there in Fort Worth. And April 5 and 6 at Bright Divinity School is going to be hosting it. Phil and Stephanie will be there, a host of other missional practitioners, and we're excited to be, you know, getting folks together to talk about how do we do church now and in the future. So that's who I am. That's my role with TransFORM. As Phil said, we're co-partners in Sogo Media, a new kind of Christian television network on YouTube. So that's a fun venture, and
I want to hear about that too. I want to ask you about that, and basically, if you're tuning in tonight, we're just having a chat. We're hanging out with Steve Knight, Phil Shepard, and we're talking about principles to transform your life. Principles that you wake up with passion and a desire to reach your community, to find your destiny, and yeah, so we want to talk about some of these things that you guys are doing, but you mentioned the YouTube channel, the Christian, what is it, like Christian media that you're putting on a YouTube channel, and tell me about that.
Yeah, we've got 2 to 3 shows per day with original content, contributors from all over the country who are producing original video content for us. all kinds of different conversations about faith and the church, and a lot of really thought-provoking stuff. Just great personalities, people doing interviews, folks like Homebrewed Christianity and Darkwood Brew, and if you haven't heard of these folks, check them out. We've got Phil Shepard, of course, is on there. I do a weekly video show called On Religion, which is a recap of the best sort of viral Christian videos on YouTube as well. So it's just a lot of fun content. It's trying to spark a conversation, get people thinking about faith, and it's YouTube.
Yeah. Well, now, why do you guys get up in the morning? I mean, what's your passion? Why are you living to the next day, and what because we have a lot of teens that are listening, and they're exploring what it is that I'm supposed to do, and I think the church we've sometimes failed in reaching out to our community, and there's lots of terms of art we could throw out, but just what is it that gets you guys going in the morning? And I just want to talk about that for a minute.
Well, usually it's my alarm clock going off at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I keep hitting snooze.
For me, it's coffee. It's coffee like all day. So,
I'm a huge coffee connoisseur myself. All honestly, for me, when we started the Eucatastrophe here in Fort Worth, a good friend of ours, Tony Jones, I was in a faith community up in Minneapolis with him before we came and planted our church, and his comment to me was, Fort Worth needs another church like it needs another hole in the head. And I laughed at that because it's true, because we are, this whole geographical area is slammed with every type of church you can think of. And what new could we bring to the table? And so we started asking the question. My wife and I, my wife Stephanie is my co-pastor, my co-founding pastor, and we still pastor to this day. We call it the Euch for short, which is the Euch is actually EU is the Greek prefix of the good. J.R. Tolkien coined the term 50, 60 years ago on a very boring essay I never encourage anybody to ever read, but it's called On Fairy Stories. It's one of the only times he was very open about his personal faith as a Christian in his writings. Uh-huh. And long story short, we picked that name because we wanted to create and provide a fresh expression, something new, a word that you will hear a lot in this interview, a missional community that creates an alternative for folks who no longer had a home in the institutional church, but still wanted to have a community surrounded by this guy named Jesus.
So let me ask you, missional community. That's an interesting term, and a lot of there's something about college age where in the church today it's like a broken pipeline. And I was a youth pastor for 8 years, and we would have teens, like through the kid program in junior high, and we would lose a lot in junior high. They would lose interest or whatever. But if you had a vibrant youth program and a strong youth group, we'd usually keep them through high school. But 90% of the time, when they went off to college, I never saw them again. It's like they left the church. They left, and many times left their faith and left their. And I think there's something broken. There's something out of sync with why can't we retain a lot of 18 to 24, 25, 26-year-olds who are passionate about their faith. I mean, what's going on? Why are we? What are we missing here? And does this missional community tie into anything like this? Are we getting burned by the church? Help me out here.
Yeah, well, when this whole emerging missional church conversation and movement got started here in North America 15 plus years ago, that was one of the major driving questions was, how do we do church differently in a way that create space to fix that, so that broken pipeline doesn't exist anymore.
You guys draw a lot of that crowd, don't you?
I think newer churches tend to, because there's a lot more freedom to experiment and do things differently. That with music and media that's more culturally relevant or whatever. But the question quickly shifted, and the realization came, and it's not really just about how do we do church differently, but how do we really fundamentally kind of change these institutions and how we think about these things. And the whole missional shift, when we talk about a missional shift in the church, to me, this is what I get excited about. This is what gets me out of bed in the morning, Rick. I mean, it's participating with God and what God is doing in the world. That's what being a missional Christian is about. I mean, some people say, well, that's what we should always have been about. That's what the church should always have been about. So it's really kind of redundant, right, to say missional Christian or missional church. But the reality is, you don't have to look very far to see that a lot of churches have been established, or at least become ingrown. They're focused on producing programs for themselves, and they're not really engaged in the wider community. They're not really reaching out and participating with God and what God is doing outside the walls of the church. And so that's what the missional, this missional shift is about. And I think as churches do that, as churches move in a missional direction, it's going to be about inviting everyone, of all ages, to participate in that, join in that, and be engaged in that. And that's what people really want. People want to make a difference in the world. People want to feel like they're a part of something that's bigger than themselves, and that's what participating with God in what Jesus talked about, the gospel of the kingdom of God. I mean, that's a really big invitation. That's really something exciting to be a part of, and that's bigger than what most churches do, right? Is they say, hey, we've got this committee. We need a young person to be on this committee to help us, plan this, event or whatever. It's like, people don't want to plug into the system in that way. They want to be able to bring who they are. They want to bring their whole selves, who God has created them to be, all of their gifts, talents, ideas, to the table, and be able to, shape it, make a difference.
Well, let me just toss in real quick. You're listening to Power Talk on 89.7 Power FM. Steve Knight is our guest, and Phil Shepard, calling from North Carolina and Fort Worth, respectively. SogaMedia.tv, and you can also go to TransFORMnetwork.org for more information. And by the way, on the YouTube channel, what do they search to find your YouTube channel?
You can just look up Sogo Media, Sogo TV.
S-O-G-O?
S-O-G-O, Sogo.
Sogo Media. All right, there you go on YouTube, and you can check them out. We're also TransFORMnetwork.org. Quite frankly, Steve, Phil, a lot of times when you start talking about, community outreach or engaging the community or the missional shift, I can hear people turning off the radio, or going, I don't know, boring. But it's really a lifestyle. I mean, it's really something that when you grasp the truth and the power behind what you're saying, it can transform not only the community's life, but your own life. Tell me why I shouldn't get mad right now and turn off the radio and go, this is boring. I don't want to hear about, what is this engaged in community and missional shift business. And I mean, why is it that this is such an important concept to grasp as Christians today?
Well, obviously you can't see me at the moment. This is Phil, by the way. And you can't see me, but you would never know that I have been a traditional pastor as well, been in the traditional systems. I am tattooed from head to toe. However, most
do you have any yellow tattoos?
Do I have any yellow? I have some yellow in my tattoos, but I don't have strictly just yellow tattoos.
Yellow you never remove from your skin. That's just a little sidebar.
Oh, so it looks like I can walk around with jaundice for the rest of my life. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. If you get a yellow tattoo, I had a tattoo guest, and he said you can remove just about any color of tattoo with laser removal except yellow.
Interesting. Well, I'll keep that in mind.
I'm sorry.
No, that's a great side note.
ADD kicking in. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's fine. I'm married to one of you ADD folks, so yes.
Okay.
Squirrel?
Pretty. Look at that. Okay, so you're covered in tats. You're not the traditional pastor. You've got the tats all over.
However, I have pastored in traditional settings, and most of the folks that come to the Eucatastrophe, and I'm just guessing that you don't have very many tattoos or piercings or anything like that. I mean, I don't want to make an assumption, but I would guess the majority of the rule here in Texas, folks look more like that than they do me. And the folks that come to the Eucatastrophe look more like you than they do me. I mean, we have professionals, we have doctors, we have people, nurses, we have IT folks, all these folks that you would think that would be find a home in an institutional church that really felt like there was the system, again, like you said, was broken, and there was nothing for them to engage them holistically. We use this word a lot, at least within the missional emergent conversation. What will engage us holistically? So that includes getting, like Steve said, involved into the larger community. We have been so insulated within the Western church for so many years. We still live, unfortunately, in this paradigm that we think if we raise a church up, that people will automatically walk in through our doors. And realistically, since World War II, that has not happened. Yet we still function in that paradigm. And I can only give you my experience. Like, take, for instance, what we do here at the Uke. We talk a lot about what can we do as a community. We're not a very large community, but we are, I would say, a potent community, because one of the things here in Fort Worth a lot of people don't ever want to talk about is this idea of human trafficking. And we, as a faith community, a Christocentric faith community, got really passionate about what could we do as a small community to get involved in the larger community, that this is a prevalent problem in our backyard. So we started a benefit concert that's once a year. It's called Traffic Jam, that we have local artists and musicians come in, and educators, and it's 12 hours of music and education on human trafficking. And we partner specifically with non-faith-based organizations to bring them in, because we think it's important that everybody, that Jesus did not call us to live in this continuous idea of slavery, and modern day slavery is very prevalent in our own backyard here in Fort Worth, at least. So that's the example that I have, that we, as doctors, musicians, pastors, this whole cornucopia of folks, we wanted to get engaged not only with our faith, but within the rest of the community. And this is how we've chosen to do that. Different missional communities looks very differently. Some folks, work with the homeless. Some folks work with AIDS outreach. Some folks are working with things within the community that we haven't even discovered yet. And that's the beauty about this conversation, that it gives us the freedom to have the creativity to partner with God where God is already working at within the community. We're not reinventing the wheel here. We're just finding the wheel that God has already created, if I can use that analogy.
Steve, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I've got to imagine, Rick, that there's probably people who, love listening to Power Talk, who are still wrestling with and have some, sort of discomfort with the traditional church. And might be wondering to themselves, like, man, do I really fit in, or where do I fit? Why is this? Why do I have these questions, or why do things sort of bother me, or whatever? And the reality is there is this conversation going on out there. There are a number of people, who are doing, really, I would say, exciting work in creating new forms of church, like what Phil and Stephanie are doing at the UK in Fort Worth, and a number of these folks, a number of these practitioners, really excited about coming together with them at this event in April 5 and 6 at Bright Divinity School, the TransFORM Southwest Conference, to talk about, to tell stories to say, if you're asking yourself this question, is this what church is supposed to be, or what is this whole missional church thing? How is it different? What does that look like? I hope people, who are listening will look it up, will check it out, consider coming and being a part of this event, because I'm really excited about the folks who are going to be there, the stories that are going to get told. It's all about just kind of helping people think outside the box of traditional church and imagine what they could be doing, what they could be a part of. The reality is we need many, many new faith communities to be formed. The fastest growing religious group in America today is the unaffiliated. And a lot of these folks are checking out of church. They're saying, I don't want to be a Christian anymore. I don't want to call myself a Christian anymore. But the reality is they have faith in God. They have some kind of spirituality, and they're looking for a way for we need new communities to be formed to create community and space for these folks. That's what the Church of the Future really needs to be about. And I'm excited to be a part of this conversation with folks who want to do that, who want to experiment, who want to create these new missional communities that are going to be places of welcome and hospitality for folks who are searching, who feel left out of the traditional church right now.
And if I could just jump in real quick, one of the things that I at least love about the emergent missional church conversation here in the DFW Metroplex is that it's not a competition amongst us. There are a handful of faith communities. There's Journey up in Dallas. There's Novitas in the Grand Prairie area. There's Church in the Cliff in the South Dallas area. There's the Eucatastrophe here in Fort Worth. There's the Search here in Fort Worth. And instead of trying, fundamentally, we were taught that it's about trying to get folks to our church. As a traditional pastor, that was my goal. Is that we were supposed to have the biggest and baddest church on the block. And within the missional emergent communities, that is not the case. I've actually encouraged folks to go to other communities if the Eucatastrophe doesn't fit, because we're not interested in being the biggest and baddest on the block. We're interested in people having a place.
Yeah. Well, what you guys are describing to me is a word that I think is key to success of not only reaching people, but reaching our community, and that's relevance, and where you're relevant to people finding their place and finding who they are and their passion, awakening to passion and purpose in life and fitting in. And, I've been to a lot of churches where and I've grown up in a lot of, I've visited a lot of churches, and I was a pastor's kid. And so, but if I were unchurched and not familiar with a lot of the church culture, it would wig me out. I mean, it would really, going in and people, hugging me and grabbing my hand across the aisle and the songs. I mean, I'm just thinking from someone who's unchurched. And I think, growing up as a Texas boy here in the South, it used to, everyone went to church, but, not so much anymore. We have a lot of young people who, they don't go to church. They haven't grown up in church, going to VBS and youth camp, and there's a lot of people, our culture more and more, it's more of an unchurched society, and so I think that makes our mission to be more relevant, even more dire, more essential for success, to be relevant, not so, just out there. I don't know. Does that make any sense, or am I just talking?
Yeah, absolutely. And at the same time, I'm all for cultural relevance. I don't think we should be afraid of culture. I think we should be engaged. But for me, this is really about an honest attempt at being faithful to the gospel in our time and our place.
Yeah.
It's about, that's really the calling. How do we follow Jesus authentically, honestly, and not be afraid to look outside the walls of the four walls of the church to say, what is God doing out there, and how can I get involved? How can I get involved in that?
That's good. Okay, well, I want to talk briefly about the TransFORM Southwest. You're listening to Power Talk. Our guests this evening, Steve Knight and Phil Shepard. Phil is in Fort Worth. And where's the youth church meet, by the way, Phil?
We just changed locations. In the last 4 years, we've been meeting right off of Sundance Square, thanks to the generosity of First Christian Church of Fort Worth. Yeah, we are actually...
Oh, see, I love Fort Worth.
Yeah, so do I. Not originally. I'm an Alaskan-grown person, but I'm a Texas transplant. I got here as quick as I could, so...
Good. Well, good for you. We forgive you.
Well,
That's good.
thank
You're
you.
here.
I appreciate it. I had to downsize in size just a little bit, going from Alaska to Texas, but I was completely okay with that. But now we meet off of 1000 Bonnie Bray, which is off of Belknap. It's about 5 minutes outside of downtown Fort Worth.
Yeah. Well, I just finished school. I graduated Texas Wesleyan School of Law in July
congratulations.
of
That's
last
a great
year.
school.
Yeah, thank you. And it was in the heart, 1515 Commerce, in the heart of downtown Fort Worth. And I lived in Fort Worth the last 4 years, 4.5, and I just grew to love it. And it's just, my kids are here and my work is in Dallas, but I love Fort Worth. So you've got a good place there. So the Uke, I guess people could go to TransFORM Network.
Or they can
find out.
Or they can also go to www.theuke, and that's THEEUC.com, and that's our church's website. Or they can find us on transformnetwork.org as well. We're one of the founding communities that helped supported TransFORM, and we're still very involved. And we're one of the hosting faith communities of the upcoming Southwest Regional Gathering that we're having in April as well. So
and that's happening April 5th and 6th. So talk to us a little bit for those listeners who are interested in attending TransFORM Southwest. What I guess you can go to transformnetwork.org to find more information. But what is that?
Yeah, TransFORM Southwest, it's a 2-day conference, and we've got 4 keynote speakers, and as well as a whole host of workshop leaders, practitioners, people who are doing new forms of church, talking about really practical stuff. I mean, this is for folks who want to know about missional church, who want to explore what it might look like to start a new missional community. It's really practical, sort of here's folks who are doing it. Here are stories of, here's what not to do. Here's, we've got a workshop on failure, how to deal with that, and how to, so we've got just fantastic people coming. It's only $25
for the whole weekend. Okay. And one of our big keynote speakers is from the Metroplex. Her name is Suzanne Stabile, and she is one of the premium, best known for her spiritual formation direction, Life in the Trinity Ministries, which is based out of North Dallas. And there is no other conference that you can go to, honestly, that you can pay $25 to hear her speak. Everything else is going to be in the $100 range or even more. And even if you just come to hear her speak, it's worth the $25. But there's going to be other incredible speakers coming. One of our good friends, Rich McCullen, is coming in from San Diego. He planted a church called Mission Gathering in San Diego. Great friend of TransFORM. He's also on the leadership board. Suzanne Castle of the Search here in Fort Worth is also going to be one of our keynote speakers. Steve and I are going to be emceeing the whole weekend, and I'm getting to do a workshop as well. So,
and this is you can get more information at transformnetwork.org. Steve, Phil, man, you guys are. I'd love to be like hanging out in the Fort Worth coffee shop late at night, discussing, debating philosophy and theology, and
anytime you want to come down, to the good part of the Metroplex, I'll take you out for coffee.
I know. I need to. I miss my Fort Worth home. So, hey, just a real quick minute or so left. Why don't you guys wrap us up with some closing thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you having us on, Rick. I mean, I'm a big fan of Christian rock music from back in the day. So it's fun to be on a Christian rock radio station doing this interview. And, you know, as I've, over the last few years, have had opportunity to come through the Metroplex, I have fallen in love with Fort Worth. It's a great city. And so I'm excited to be back April 5 and 6 for TransFORM Southwest. And, you know, to me, one of the most exciting things happening in the church right now is this missional trip. So I hope people will check it out. We'll look into it and come hang out with us.
What did your Christian rock habit look like? You know, was it Petrus, Sweet Comfort Band, Brian Duncan, Joey?
Oh, man. I was into some sweet metal.
Resurrection Band.
Res Band. Let's start with Striper and just go from there, you know.
Okay, see, I can tell somebody's age by the era of music. So when you say Striper, and I got you now.
Little Mastodon for you, White Cross. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, all right, well, Phil, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, those of you who are still listening and are having doubts about the church, we all have doubts about the church, and there's still hope out there. There is a place for you. And there are communities out there all over the United States and all over the world now that are doing this. And that's not saying that the old expressions of faith are no longer important, because they are. They are. We're not saying that. This is just a different expression of church. And there is hope for, you know, the millennials. There are hopes for the Xers. There are hopes, you know, my mother, who is over 70 years old, she loves the Eucatastrophe. If she lived here, this would be the community that she's a part of. And so this is not just an age thing. This is just, as Steve put, a shift in thinking and a way of doing church. So there is hope.
Awesome. Excellent. Yeah. Excellent, man. I appreciate that. And I guess, Steve, you're going to, as soon as we're done, go put in your White Cross or One Bad Pig and jam out a little bit. So I guess we need to close it out. Woo. So, hey, guys, thank you so much. Steve Knight and Phil Shepard, TransFORMNetwork.org. Guys, really appreciate your time this evening.
Thanks, Rick, for having us.
All right, thanks a bunch. And once again, that TransFORM Southwest is happening on April 5th and 6th. You can go to TransFORMNetwork.org. We'll see you next Sunday right here on the Christian Rock Station.